Good evening and welcome to my show. I have a dream too, empowering you. Tonight we have a very special guest, Miss C.Virgina Fields. She is the president and CEO of the National Black Leadership Commission on AIDS. Welcome, Miss Fields.
Thank you. A pleasure to join you.
Yes, thank you, and I'm very much honored to have you join me on this show tonight. Ms. Fields is being Skyped in from her office because of weather conditions, so she could not join me personally here at the studio, but that's just as good, so thank you. Ms. Fields, I've read a lot about your history and what you stand for and your leadership in the community, and as the president and the CDO of NBLOCA, which is actually called the acronyms for National Black Leadership Commission on AIDS, how did this all begin for you? What is that NBLOCA stand for?
Well, first of all, let me just say a little about NBLOCA. As you said, it stands for the National Black Leadership Commission on AIDS. And this organization was founded like about 1987. So it's actually the oldest organization of its kind in the nation that mobilizes and work with local leaders in black communities to address HIV/AIDS and other health disparities. When it was formed under the leadership of our founder, Deborah Fraser Howes, and the National Urban League, black ministers were brought together to say, hey, look, many black men and African Americans are also dying from what we knew little about as it relates to what HIV is and the virus and how it was impacted. But what was known, blacks were also dying, black gay men, but there was very little focus on it, as you probably know. So that's what gave leadership to this organization. And given the role of black clergy in our communities, they took the leadership, and hence now we have affiliates in 11 cities: Tampa, Atlanta, Washington, D.C., Detroit, Michigan, New York City, Long Island, Albany, Buffalo, Rochester, and Syracuse. And in each one of those cities, we have built an infrastructure whereby we work with community stakeholders and leaders throughout those communities: clergy, academia, policy, elected officials, consumers, providers of services, health departments, to bring people together, identifying what the needs are in that community. And even though they are affiliates, because communities differ, they decide what those needs are, what the gaps are, and develop a plan of action to address them. So our focus in terms of our mission is to educate, mobilize, and empower black leaders to meet the challenge of HIV/AIDS and other health disparities in their local communities. And we do that through technical assistance, capacity building, policy, advocacy, resource development, and counseling and testing, and getting persons who are positive linked to care.
Yes. And so we know that there is a continuance of epidemic of HIV in the black community. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yes, as a matter of fact, the way I got started in this, of course, after having served in elected office here in New York City for some 17 years as a member of the New York City Council for 2 terms, and as president of the borough of Manhattan, this wonderful borough that I'm sitting in now
Yes.
for 2 terms, I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do. So I took a couple of years off, and during that time, I was approached by the founder, Deborah Frazier House, because she was moving to the private sector, and she handpicked me, unbeknown to me, to do this work. And my first reaction was, no, I don't really know anything about HIV and AIDS, despite the fact that as an elected official, I had funded programs, had supported legislation in housing for persons living with AIDS, and this was a very difficult time when many communities did not want persons who were known to be living with the virus in their community because less was understood about the transmission of the virus. So I became interested. So I started reading. I started reading the Center for Disease reports. I started reading other reports, and I was absolutely amazed at the impact of HIV/AIDS among African Americans. And here we are more than 30 years later, and according to the reports from the Center for Disease Control, African Americans are still disproportionately impacted, specifically young black gay men, black men who have sex with men, and heterosexual black women. Heterosexual black women represent over 60% of all of the new cases of HIV among all women. Now, those are very startling and disturbing numbers.
Yes.
And we have to get that information out more.
Right. And I agree because when I began to look at what MBlock is doing in terms of increasing awareness and education, I too was startled by the numbers. And I guess you really don't hear much about it unless someone is infected by it. So, and so how important it is to let our African American community to be empowered, okay, but also create the awareness and the understanding of where this all begins, why do you have it, or how you can protect yourself from this disease that is still ongoing.
Very much so, and that speaks to the need for education and awareness. And those are the areas, especially in today's funding cycles, to get funded. Because if you're not doing treatment and care where you can say, okay, we brought X number of persons in, they're on care, we're following them, they're doing okay. You can measure that. But the prevention side of it, education, awareness, getting people to understand, number one, that HIV is alive and well.
Yes.
HIV is preventable, but if there is no cure for HIV, and getting that information out there. So one of the reasons I'm particularly interested in comprehensive sex education in our schools is because of the increase in numbers of sexually transmitted infections that we are now seeing among our youth. As early an age as 11, we're seeing increased cases of chlamydia, gonorrhea, and syphilis. But yet, we do not have comprehensive sex education in our public schools from K to 12, and obviously you would teach it based on age-appropriate curriculums. Right. There's a great deal of pushback, even from parents saying they don't want their children learning about human growth and development and issues of human sexuality because that would increase their interest in perhaps becoming sexually involved earlier. Doesn't work that way. The numbers speak for themselves.
Well, this is critical. It absolutely is critical. And why do you think that there's a continuance of not having this in the school systems? Because we do see it that, and as you said, the statistics speak for themselves, but what do you think is the reason why we have this continuance of not adhering to the need?
I think it probably speaks to a couple of things. And you probably will remember a few years back, there was a whole debate about teaching about homosexuality in the schools. And a lot of parents saw comprehensive sex education teaching about homosexuality. Totally different. Teaching about sexual health, teaching about sexual behavior in all of its forms, but it's also about the human development of one's body, understanding one's body, and how to protect oneself from various illnesses, diseases, viruses, talking about HIV and other health issues. So I think it's a lack of understanding, and one of the things that I certainly support and have always advocated is 2 tracks in the school. One track where you work with the parents, helping them to fully understand what the curriculum is, giving them a chance to go through it, to understand what would be taught in that curriculum, and then the track with the students themselves. And at some point, the two might come together. But it is age appropriate, culturally sensitive, but more important, it is information that young people need to know. And by doing it that way, you can also engage the parents so that a lot of this learning needs to continue in the home.
Yes.
So I think it's just a lack of awareness and fear about what these curriculums are, but not taking the time to really go and understand it, but just outright rejecting it.
Right. And so really what's being said is this will still continue to be a problem. Now, I know that Governor Cuomo has put something on the table in regards to bending the curve. Very recently, he did that some months ago, perhaps back in May. He talked about reducing the number of HIV incidents and so forth. What is that about?
Yes, Governor Cuomo actually is the only governor in the nation who has really stepped forward to make a declaration that we're going to work toward ending or certainly decreasing significantly the number of new HIV cases in New York State by 2020.
Right.
And there are 3 major factors or areas on which his proposal leans. One has to do with prevention. What can we do to prevent new infection? One has to do with linking people who are infected to care so that they can receive treatment and live a better quality of life. And the other has to do more or less with access to care, making sure that people have insurance and the facilities and the resources that they need in order to get the proper treatment. And under the Affordable Care Act, the possibilities have been increased significantly. I am a member of his task force. He appointed about 60 persons from around the state, to serve as members of this task force. And so far, we've had 3 meetings. We will be having our final meeting next week and presenting a blueprint to the governor in January with our recommendations as to what we must do to drastically reduce and eliminate HIV/AIDS by 2020.
Right.
And I would add that I'm a member of the prevention component of these 3 areas, and we've been working a lot on what's needed in prevention. Comprehensive sex education certainly is one of them, but we also focus on, I'm sure you've heard about PrEP, which is pre-exposure prophylaxis, and this is a regimen that has been approved by the Food and Drug Administration for persons who are negative and either may be engaged in sexual activities that possibly could lead to HIV, but they are negative. So by taking this 1 pill daily, it has been shown that it eliminates, it avoids the transmission of HIV. And that's really a good thing, but there are other guidelines to go along with it, recommending that, the number of sex partners and that your sex partners, continuing to use condoms as a prevention method, and having follow-up visits with your doctor. So this is a positive step, but it's still not a cure.
Right.
And what we're also seeing is that the population most highly impacted, Black gay men, young men who have sex with men, are the populations not using PrEP as much as others are. And it is very expensive.
Right. I was wondering if it's covered by insurance.
Yes.
It is covered by insurance.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So basically, before we go to a break, what we're really talking about, the needs are educating in the K through 12, educating in the communities for women, since the high number is 60%. And in 2014, there was 3,000 newly cases of HIV infection. So there's still that ongoing need of education and awareness. And just before we go to break, what do we need to do in our local communities? People who are watching the show, how can we continue to spread the word that we need to be able to educate our young ones, our parents, women, where these cases are highly populated?
We really do need to get involved. We need to do three things. We need to become better educated about what is happening, and part of your show, and I want to thank you for that, making the opportunity available to talk to the broader audience. Getting involved, getting educated, and then getting involved by talking to others, starting within your own home, your own community, your own church, your own civic organizations, spreading the word, generating more of an opportunity for people wanting to know, and then getting tested to know one's own status. So if one is positive, getting into care, because with antiretroviral treatments now and many of the other improvements that have come about since 30 years or so ago, people living with the virus can live a healthier, more productive life.
Okay.
So get educated, get involved, get tested, and let's do it right in our own communities will be an important way to get started.
Yes. Thank you, and we'll be right back.
Could switching to Geico really save you 15% or more on car insurance? Do dogs chase cats?
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance.
My name is Dr. Robert Brevard. I'm here for Multi-Medicine in Westbury, New York. We're located at 1065 Old Country Road, Suite 214. Been here for about 15 years. The practice has medical doctors, physical therapists, chiropractors, acupuncturists. We also do pain management, and we have orthopedists on staff. Here at Advanced Multi-Medicine Rehabilitation, we've got physical therapists on staff who treat an array of conditions, from neck pain to back pain, shoulder pain. We treat carpal tunnel. We treat a lot of car accident patients, slip and falls. We treat patients with knee injuries, with ankle injuries. We have state-of-the-art equipment. We've been here for over 15 years. Vast array of diagnostic testing, from x-rays to EMGs. What is an EMG? It's a diagnostic test that allows a doctor to determine where the pinched nerve is. Cora is a physical therapist at Advanced Multi-Medicine and Rehabilitation. She's working on Stephanie, who was involved recently in an automobile accident. Stephanie has tight thoracic and cervical musculature, and Cora is doing some myofascial release work and some therapeutic stretching, doing it to help her with her pain. Vicky is also a patient here at Advanced Multi-Medicine and Rehabilitation. Vicky is now working her leg muscles, specifically her quadricep muscles, trying to strengthen them after an injury she sustained. If you find yourself in need of any type of physical therapy, please don't hesitate to call Advanced Multi-Medicine and Rehabilitation, located in Westbury, New York, in Suite 214. Phone number is 516-334-7000, or find us on our website at advancedmultimedicine.com.
Welcome back to the show. I Have a Dream Too, Empowering You, and I am your host, Jacqueline Harris. And I'm here this evening with C.Virgina Fields. Again, she is the president of and CEO of NBLACA, which is the National Black Leadership Commission on AIDS. So we're just talking about AIDS and education and awareness. Now we're going to move on to the next subject, which is hepatitis C, which is something that you don't hear about at all. And so hepatitis C is a liver disease, and it's something that's affecting, again, the African American community. So, Ms. Fields, can we talk about that? Because I know you're doing a lot with that as well.
Yes, as a matter of fact, the National Black Leadership Commission on AIDS, in partnership with two local groups, COPE and Harm Reduction, we sponsored our second African American Action Day this past July, where we focused on the impact again of another disease that is disproportionately impacting African American. As you said, hepatitis C affects the liver, and it's a silent disease. So therefore, one might not know that they actually have it or been affected until it has advanced to the point of cirrhosis of the liver or the need for liver transplant or cancer.
Wow.
So this is something that we are particularly concerned about because there is a cure for hepatitis C, and that's really good news. It is known to be mostly among baby boomers, my generation. And so we encourage people who were born anywhere between 1945 and 1965 who perhaps might have been actively involved with drug use much earlier on in their lives. And this is also the era, remember, of Vietnam. And many of our brothers and sisters came back from the war, strung out on the drugs, and continued that life. So it is about persons who have been actively involved in drug use early on, may not be now. Persons who might have had blood transfusion before the early 90s when there were certain guidelines and regulations put in place. Persons who may have had sexual relationships with another person who might be infected, and somehow during that process, blood contact was made. So it's a blood-borne, virus or disease, and we encourage persons in those categories to please be tested because there is a cure.
Yes, and currently there are 3.2 million people living in the United States that are infected with this disease. Is that correct?
That's correct, and what we're finding now that there are more deaths due to hepatitis C than there are from HIV. And we're also seeing that persons who are living with the HIV virus are particularly susceptible to perhaps becoming infected with hepatitis C, and therefore you got a co-infection going on now, HIV, AIDS, and hepatitis C. And of course, it becomes much more challenging, but not difficult in terms of addressing the virus and the disease. So we encourage people to get tested for screening for hepatitis C.
Right. But I also understand that if you even go for a physical or what have you, it's not a test that actually just occurs. The doctor does a routine test to see if you have hepatitis C. If you're born between that era of 1945 and 1965, you actually have to ask for that testing to be done. Is that correct also?
Interesting enough, here in the state of New York, again, very progressive, earlier this year, Governor Cuomo signed into law hepatitis C legislation that really requires doctors to offer the test, the same as we were able to get the public health law changed for routine testing a few years back, where doctors really should offer the hepatitis C test as they should offer HIV test as a part of routine testing. Now, does it happen? No, not to the extent that it could or should. And that's why part of our work here, the National Black Leadership Commission on AIDS, is to work with providers, medical providers. We have had a series of summits and forums throughout the city of New York with Touro College, with several hospitals, a part of the State University of New York system, with providers, medical providers, letting them know what they should look for, what are some of the questions they should ask. We've also had it with residents. So as they go through their training, what we like to do is to work to try to get it to be a part of the curriculum in medical schools so that it's much more routine for them as opposed to waiting, say, maybe for the patient to say, hey, look, can I be tested for hepatitis C or HIV?
Yes, and this is the thing, and once again, it's that education and awareness. It's about empowering people. That's what I love about my show, is to bring on people to spread the information, the message through the airways, through this broadcast. How important it is because a lot of our African Americans are dying, and no one knew that, this particular disease is related to baby boomers. And the testing is simple from what I understand, but to know that there's 3.2 million in this country that are living with this disease, and then some don't even know it. Is absolutely alarming. And so I guess we need to put our dollars somewhere to help provide this education awareness. I know also that MBLOC has participated in many community forums throughout the boroughs and including Long Island. Just to go back to the testing, what does that actually consist of? So people can be aware of, the testing is simple, but what does the testing look like?
Simple blood test.
Exactly. Okay, a simple blood test that you actually really sounds like you have to ask your doctor, okay, because they are not informed of something that should be routine when they see that you're age 50, okay, you're part of the baby boomer age, that you need to have this test. So it's a simple blood test that could help you and provide you some, keep you away from the disease. So that's great.
But it certainly help you to become cured.
Right,
cured. It can certainly help you hopefully live a better quality of life. But I think, again, one of the issues, too, is because it's a silent disease.
Yes.
And by the time many people become aware of it, it has progressed to another stage or another level. That's why getting tested simply by knowing about it, and especially if your lifestyle early on in life may be different now, but you knew what you were doing in the 80s, you knew what you were doing in the 90s, you may not be doing it in the 2000s, but those are some of the risks. The other thing I want to point out is all of the business about tattooing, because many of the tattoo shops are not as careful in terms of cleaning the equipment that they use. And so you really want to make sure that if you become tattooed, that you're going to reputable businesses and making certain that the equipment are sterilized and that you are in a safe environment. And when you see some of these people with tattoos from the head to the toe and everywhere in between, that you have to know, they got to know this stuff.
Right.
You've got to know this stuff.
I'm glad you brought that up because tattooing is the wave of the future. And again, a lot of people have engaged in that. And, if it's not health department certified, because there are many places that kids can go and get tattooed, and there's really is no license. It's just that it makes it affordable for them. But do they really know that they need to have this stuff sterilized? How do they know? They just know that I got a tattoo for $60 as opposed to paying $150 for it. And it's a silent killer. So you would never know that you have, got this disease.
Exactly. That's why, again, your show is so incredibly important in terms of talking about these issues. But I go back to something I said earlier, and, I find it disturbing, but it's the reality. When we look at programs and initiatives that get funded, these are the areas that are losing funding and getting the least amount of support. But without that education and on some levels that advocacy, we're not going to see policy changes.
Yes.
We're not going to see funding going into making sure that regulations like health departments doing inspections, and we're not going to see the changes that we know need to be made at the policy level without the education and awareness part.
Right, and before we go to a break again, it really means that us as a community, we need to demand it, and it only comes from education and knowledge and awareness. If we don't know and we have the fear, it's not going to happen, and we'll continue to see the numbers rise. So we'll take a break and we'll be right back.
Hi, my name is Dr. Tom Dow. We have a multidisciplinary practice in Melville and Ronkonkoma, New York, and we treat patients with many, many different conditions, from newborns through geriatric patients with numerous different techniques. There's a technique and a type of treatment for every class of patient. We have them all here. Here's my son Thomas, also a doctor of chiropractic, working on one of our patients' cervical spine. This patient has had chronic neck pain for many, many, many years, has been to a multitude of different practitioners with little or no response. And with our specialized techniques, she has improved tremendously and continues to improve on a daily basis. We have two practices, one in Melville and one in Ronkonkoma, New York. We are a multidiscipline chiropractic office. What that means is we have chiropractors, massage therapists, acupuncturists, psychologists, all working as a team and a network of outside professionals such as orthopedists and neurologists that we work hand in hand with to help determine what your injuries are and the best way to treat your injuries. I have the great pleasure of having my son in practice with me. We work hand in hand, father and son, to give our patients the best care possible, and a staff which is loving, caring, and you'll never have to wait at all in our office for service. Many times patients come into our office and they have what's called a soft tissue injury. Soft tissue injuries are like scars inside your body. If you've ever been cut on the outside of your body, you get a scar. The same thing happens inside of your body to your muscles and ligaments. So our job is to determine where those are, stretch the muscles, adjust the vertebra back into their correct position, and then refortify the normal structure with exercise. That's what we do best, and I hope someday you'll come see us at one of our two offices. Thank you.
Welcome back to I Have a Dream Too, Empowering You. I'm here with C.Virgina Fields. And so we were just talking about hepatitis C, another critical disease that needs to be bring about awareness and education in the African American community. So as we closed off, we said that it is a simple test, which consists of a blood test, and that people need to ask for it when they go to the doctor. Many doctors, while it's there, they're not informed as well. However, M-Blocker is also doing a lot of community health forums. And talk a little bit about that, Ms. Fields.
Yes, we're doing health forums in all of our affiliate cities. As I said earlier, we're in Tampa, Florida, Atlanta, Georgia, Washington, D.C., Detroit, Michigan, Long Island, New York City, Albany, Buffalo, Rochester, Syracuse, New York. And in each one of our cities where we have established affiliates, we partner with other community-based organizations, other faith-based institutions, academia, departments of health, to do not only health fairs where testing takes place for a variety of purposes, diabetes and other known diseases. We also do education and public health forums where we bring the community together to talk about the issues that we're discussing on your show today, to be able to bring in the community leaders and the community stakeholders to talk about what is happening in that community. For example, I don't remember all of the statistics right off, but we were up in Buffalo and Rochester, because we had a bus shelter campaign, and we had signs on bus shelters, and it really piqued the interest of people locally. And when we revealed to them the the statistics in that county, they were very, very surprised. So it is important to let people locally know. We can talk about globally what the problems are.
Right.
We can talk about nationally, as you mentioned. But when you begin to break it down zip code by zip code, and you say, wow, that's the zip code I live in. I never knew HIV or hepatitis C was as as much at the rate are as they are in my own zip code. So we do these forums to educate, to engage, and we also do it with legislators with the hope that they would begin to look at ways that they can think about policy changes and budgets in order to effectively address this work.
And I'm glad you brought that up. Now, anyone who is interested, and you said zip code by zip code, who's interested in having a community forum, faith-based in their church, how can they reach you?
Well, in our case, where we have affiliates, you can certainly go to our website, www.nblca.org. You can follow us on Twitter, you can follow us on Facebook, but in terms of information about our programs, we encourage you to go to our website, www.nblca.org. And we can also talk to you about doing forums in your own cities, even if we don't have an affiliate, because what's important are partnerships, and we have partnerships with over 180 more organizations and groups around the country. And by working with them, we're able to expand the work that we do by not having an affiliate in that city.
And that's beautiful, because being able to reach out, and again, it's another way of bringing some awareness and being able to get people to come together and create a movement throughout this country. It's necessary to bring that, HIV is still running rampant in our communities for our women, and they're young women that are catching this disease. Particularly now you have an uprise of children that commercially sexually exploited children, girls, okay? So, that also goes hand in hand. We have the hepatitis C, which is a silent killer, as you mentioned. And so if we don't do this, we're losing more and more of our population. And we're losing more and more of our young people that need to be able to continue to move this throughout the country.
And you mentioned something I just want to comment, because you mentioned the young women. When we look at the age range of young African American women who are most highly in impact, it is the childbearing age group, that 20 to 30 age group. And if we aren't careful, what are we doing in terms of future, births in the next generation? But it's that child age, bearing group that we have to really be focused on. The other thing I would like to say generally about it is that for the very first time in this country, about 3 years ago, President Obama appointed, or rather approved, the first national HIV/AIDS strategy for this country. This almost 30 years ago at that time. We never had a national AIDS strategy. Yet, for the funds that we give to other countries, especially Africa and so forth, we require them to have a strategy, a national AIDS strategy. So President Obama signed into law a national HIV/AIDS strategy about 3 years ago that has certain goals to be met, including reducing and eliminating, especially in communities that are underserved, and it is the Black communities. So that has helped a lot in terms of trying to redirect resources into areas, not to the extent that we need, that we still want to see happen with those dollars, but it has begun to raise the level of awareness and consciousness to look at, okay, where are the dollars? If I'm looking at this zip code and the numbers aren't going down, let's look at what are the services, what are the resources, and match those up against the increase in rates. And that has to tell us something.
Yes, it does. And so we really need more people to be involved in making this something, so we don't have a complete, generation gone because of lack of awareness. So, but one of the things that I found absolutely interesting about you, one, that you're have a master's in social work like myself.
All right.
Yes. So also was that you, over the summer, you had a resolution that was presented to you from the FDNY, which is the Fire Department of New York City. And so that was a resolution that I think also gave you some accolades into where you are today and what you experienced at a younger age. So let's just talk a little bit about that resolution that you received and how that all came about.
Well, actually, it was Congresswoman Carolyn Maloney who initiated, it was her press conference, and what she found was that at that same time, leading up to the 50th year march in D.C., that in 1963, apparently, the New York City Fire Department issued a resolution, and it was sent to Birmingham denouncing the actions of that fire department as it was seen around the world, putting the hose pipes on kids, older people, and everybody in between, as we demonstrated and fought for our rights against the Jim Crow laws that exist. So she was really acknowledging, and quite frankly, that was the first time I heard about it. I didn't know that they had done that. When you're living in Birmingham and you're a young teenager, you aren't necessarily focused on those things. So I was really glad to see that they actually wrote a resolution, denounced the Birmingham Fire Department for how they were using the fire department, because it clearly was not the mission of any fire department.
So for people who don't know and who are watching, you talk about Birmingham, Alabama, which is your birthplace. And that was during the time of the Jim Crow laws and all of those things. And I think that's your foundation of being a community leader. And so just talk about that and experiencing that experience at 16 years old.
Well, I was born and grew up in Birmingham, Alabama. So when you live there all of your life and you lived under conditions that were right in your face, everywhere you went was segregated. The lunch counters, the department stores, the public theaters, the communities, if your parents worked, where they worked, all based on color, and the schools, in order to prevent us from having to pass by schools in our communities that were predominantly white. What did the government do? They built new schools in our communities. But the interesting part is that what they thought would be, they thought they were doing something, but they were really doing us a favor, because we got new buildings, gymnasiums, cafeterias, science labs, the kind of schools that everybody wanted. But more importantly, we had an opportunity to be taught. by some of the finest young black teachers you could find in this country, because they couldn't teach in the white schools. And these were teachers who had graduated from the historical black colleges, Howard, Tuskegee, Talladega, you name them, Morehouse, Spelman, all of them. And they came back home. So in some ways, they had to prove to their parents that their parents had not wasted their money.
Right.
And they had to prove, too, that they were the best of the best. And they taught us. So when I hear today, for example, students don't know black history, that was a part of our curriculum. Don't know what we now call the National Black Anthem. You knew that because you sang it every day in school.
But you
so
lived
growing
it.
up in Birmingham did help to shape my life. Coming out of those experiences led me to go to school of social work, because as we know, that's a profession that speaks to changing lives, transforming communities, and making a difference. So growing up in Birmingham did help to shape the things that I've done as an adult social worker, elected official, being able to use government to make a difference in the lives of people, because I do believe government by the people, of the people, and for the people, and not that government can do everything, but government can certainly make a difference. So those were learning experiences, and I'm very grateful that I've been able to continue them in my life's work.
Right. But you also experienced that hose down that everyone has seen around the world. And just a little bit talk about that, because that is something at the age of 16, which you've spoken about before, but that experience that has been seen, in history has made it.
It was an experience. I marched in the first and only march that Dr. King led in Birmingham, which was Good Friday, and he and Reverend Abernathy led the march. And as a result of that march, I spent 6 days in the Birmingham jail. As a part of that whole time and movement, I too was knocked down by the fire hoses. So I know the force of fire hoses, but it was all, again, with purpose in mind, and we see what came out of that, voting rights, Civil Rights Act, housing laws, and significant changes in our country as a result of believing that you can make a difference. But were they difficult days? Absolutely. And I'm often asked, were you afraid? And I said, you know what? I guess it's something about you. You don't think about dangers as such. And I see that a lot today with what we're seeing with the marching coming out of Ferguson and now here in New York City and around the country. That if you believe that you can make a difference, and if you believe that there is purpose, we were not interested in violence, and that's why I'm glad to see what is happening today, especially here in New York City. It's peaceful. There is a purpose. There is determination, and people want to see change, and that's what we did in Birmingham, and we know the changes that came from those early experiences.
And I'm glad you said that just before we go to a break about the fear. In the same way, if we could come together and remove the fear about the need to be educated and aware and get tested on HIV and hepatitis C, you know what, we would have much more lives that are here today. So we're going to take a break, and we'll be right back.
Are you planning an event and want to include entertainment, but you're not sure where to turn?
Act1Entertainment.net has provided over 1,500 events with quality, affordable live entertainment at private parties, corporate affairs, festivals, bike rallies, and more. Act 1 will fit into your budget. They're friendly, reliable, and do all the legwork for you. They take all major credit cards. Log on to Act1Entertainment.net for a free, no-obligation price quote, or call 631-758-3505 for a brochure.
You'll be happy you did.
Yo, what's up, y'all? This is me, DMC, in the place to be, the greatest MC in history. There will never be an MC greater than me. And right about now, the only place for you to be is with the one and only Madhousetv.
You are the man.
Welcome to Formula Auto Wash, where every day is a great day for a car wash. Open 7 days a week from 8 a.m. till 5:30 p.m. Sundays 8 a.m. till 4 p.m. Detailing packages for every budget, starting out at $29.99. 100% hand wash and detail centre. Horsehair and microfiber brushes and mitts. Proudly using Ecolab Blue Coral soaps and waxes. Formula Auto Wash has served the community for over 30 years. Senior discounts all day, every day. Ladies' Day Wednesday, $3 off any wash. Early bird discount Monday through Thursday till 9:30 a.m. Check out our website, formulaautowash.com.
For professional motorcycle transport and towing, think Kickstart Fabrications Motorcycle Towing. Proudly serving all of Long Island, we feature expert handling and 24/7 service. So send a limo for your toy with Kickstart Fabrications Motorcycle Towing.
Welcome back to the show. And before while we were on break, we had a call up, and the call, I have to put on my glasses for this because I can't read it, okay? Wanted to know, how do people get involved with NBLOCKA in Nassau County, New York, here in Long Island? How do people get involved with NBLOCKA and perhaps maybe hosting, as we talked about, those community health forums?
I'm sorry.
Before you say that, also, I do know at the Freeport United Methodist Church at 46 Pine Street, we did host a community health forum, and it was excellent. It was quite informative. I did participate in it, and that's why I felt that I have to have you on my show, because of the awareness that's needed. But if people want to get involved in Nassau County, where is that location at in Nassau?
Okay, again, if they go to our website, they will see the information, the contact information for the Nassau, Long Island BLOCKA of Nassau. All of the information. Our chairperson out there is the Reverend Easley. However, the event, as you mentioned, the Freeport United Methodist Church, we are happy to be involved with Reverend Ed Norman and his leadership out there. That was, I understand, a very, very informative, and we thank you so much for participating in that forum that focused on all of these issues: hepatitis C, HIV, and sexually transmitted infections. So we want to do more with Reverend Norman, his congregation, and others in that end. But as far as direct contact, on the website you will see BLOCKA of Nassau, Long Island, and it has all the contact information.
Okay, beautiful. Okay, so that's very important.
And that's www.blca.org, and then go to the NBLOCKA of Long Nassau.
Okay. All right, that's great, because we're here. Is there one for Suffolk County, or is it just cover, oh, you said Long Island. So it covers Nassau and Suffolk counties?
Yes.
Okay, all right. And then they can also go to the general and find all the other states that are participating in this as well.
Exactly.
Okay, great. So, Ms. Fields, is there anything that you could say right now? We have a few more minutes to our audience in terms of what do we need to do as a community? Again, if you just want to reiterate that.
I think as a community, we need to continue to do the kind of events that you were involved with, local community forum. There's a lot out there on the internet that comes from the Center for Disease Control, that comes from the health departments. And quite often when I'm in meetings, those who are leading those meetings as government officials say, well, there's so much information. Correct. But people at the local level do not go to the internet to find out about HIV. We need to have these conversations in our beauty salons, in our barbershops, in our houses of worship, in our own homes, in our communities, in our civic organization. I just want to make a plug for one of the organizations I'm a part of, and that's the Links. And in the National Links program, for the first time, we now have an HIV hepatitis C committee. And it's one of our national committees, which means that across the country, linked chapters are going to be addressing HIV and hepatitis C. So whether we're sororities, and I'm an Alpha Kappa Alpha
Okay,
woman,
all right.
AKA, we too are doing it, and Deltas are very much involved, along with many of our friends in the fraternities. So using each one of our civic, our community, our faith-based organizations to raise awareness. And we certainly encourage more of our faith-based organizations, if they have health ministries, to have this as a part of the discussion.
Thank you.
Those are important things we can all do.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so, you know, I want to thank you for sharing your information, coming on. You know, the weather was bad, so you couldn't be here with me, but you were able to Skype you in and just have such a great conversation to empower others, and it's so important. And, you know, I look forward to doing some work with you all and Blocker, okay? And hopefully we'll be able to, you know, meet in person and be able to share some things. So as always, I like to close out with a quote I think is important, which is pertinent to what we do. But before I close out, I also want to say that I Have a Dream Too, Empowering You, airs every Wednesday from 6 to 7 p.m. And if anyone needs to reach me, they can certainly reach me on my email at IHaveADream2, that's TOO 2013, at gmail.com. As well as you can find me on Facebook under Jacqueline Harris, and also like my fan page at I Have a Dream Too. In addition to that, my website is under construction, so you'll be able to see all the great things that I've done since October, since I've been on this journey of empowerment and bringing other people on. So thank you. So my quote for this evening is, we cannot seek achievement for ourselves and forget about progress and prosperity for our community. Our ambitions must be broad enough to include the aspirations and needs of others for their sakes and for our own. So I thought that was a great quote, because we need to uplift and empower and have a movement of awareness on everything that we do. And it doesn't just have to be about the Black community. It's everything that we do, and that's what this show is about, to bring people together and send a message across the airways that, you know what, I have a dream too. And whatever that is, let's make it happen. So again, I want to thank you this evening for coming on, and it's been very good. Thank you so much. Have a good evening. Thank you for joining us this evening. Have a good night.